morning, Chair. This is the final day of the hearing. Today we will be hearing from 3 witnesses: Jane Mayer regarding her brother Daniel Fairman, Emma Cracknell regarding her mother Susan Spring, and Catherine Peck regarding her brother Richard Elliott. That will be followed by a closing statement from counsel to the inquiry, Nicholas Griffin, King's Counsel. Before we hear any evidence, however, I would like to point to the fact that today's evidence may in parts be distressing and difficult to listen to. For some, it may not be possible to sit through this session. Anyone in the hearing room is welcome to leave at any point. I'd like to remind people that emotional support is available for all of those who require it. We have support staff here from Hestia, an experienced provider of emotional support. There's a private room downstairs where you can talk to Hestia's support staff if you require any support at all throughout this hearing. The Hestia support staff are wearing orange-coloured lanyards and scarves, or please speak to a member of the inquiry staff. We're all wearing purple lanyards. If you are watching online, information about available emotional support can be found on the Lampard Inquiry website at lampardinquiry.org.uk and under the support tab near the top right-hand corner. We want all those engaging with the inquiry to feel safe and supported. Thank you. Our first witness is ready to be sworn, please.
Okay. I, Jane Mayer, swear by Almighty God that the evidence I shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Thank you. Can you state your full name for the record, please?
Jane Ann Mayer.
You are the sister of Daniel Edward Fairman, who was born on the 23rd of February 1965 and died on the 17th of August 2018 at the age of 53. Is that right?
That's correct, yes.
You would like me to refer to your brother as Dan throughout my questions?
I would do.
And you'd like me to call you Jane?
Yes, please.
By way of background, the inquiry sent a Rule 9 request for evidence to you, your legal representatives in fact, on the 28th of January this year. And in response to that request, you have provided a written witness statement. You have a copy of that statement in front of you. It's 12 pages long and dated the 7th of April this year. Could you please turn to the final page of that statement? We see that you made a statement of truth and then you've signed that statement.
Yeah.
Have you had an opportunity to read through that statement recently?
I have, yes.
I believe there's one correction to make to a date at paragraph 10 on page 3. The date 23rd of May 2019 should read 23rd of May 2018. Is that right?
In point 15?
In paragraph 10, sorry, on page 3.
Yes, that's correct.
The 23rd of May 2019, that should say 2018.
Yeah, I see what you mean, yes.
Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Aside from that correction, is that document true and accurate to the best of your knowledge and belief?
It is.
That witness statement, as you know, will stand as your evidence to the inquiry. Although I'm going to ask you some questions about it, I won't go through it line by line,
No.
but I want you to be assured that the Chair and the inquiry team have read the entire contents of that statement very carefully,
Thank you.
and it will form part of the body of evidence upon which the inquiry will rely.
Mm-hmm.
I would also like to indicate that you have provided a commemorative and impact account in relation to Dan, and you'll be reading out that account at the end of my questions today. The inquiry is extremely grateful to you for your written and oral evidence. I'd like to remind you I won't be asking you to name individual clinicians, so please try not to name any members of staff. If at any point you require a break, please just flag that to me and we can pause.
Thank you.
Your evidence will focus on your concerns in relation to Dan's care and treatment under the care of the Priory in Essex and Essex Partnership University NHS Foundation Trust, or EPUT. You state in your witness statement that the events therein come from both your recollection and also documents that you have Helpfully, you've listed those as the root cause analysis report, the action plan, and the record of inquest. Is that right?
That's correct.
I'd like to start by setting out a brief timeline of Dan's involvement with Essex Mental Health Services. I will summarise the key dates taken from your witness statement, but please do stop me if you feel that I summarise anything incorrectly. Please also feel free to refer to the statement in front of you at any time throughout my questions.
Thank you.
As I understand it, according to your witness statement, Dan's mental health issues started in early 2017. Is that
That's
right?
correct, yeah.
You state it seemed as though he went from one specialist to another without getting better, and so you told him to see one clinician who could address all of his mental health concerns. Is that right?
That's correct, yeah.
Dan was under the care of the Priory in Essex from March to May 2018.
Mm-hmm.
During his first consultation at the Priory in March 2018, he was prescribed alternative medication and also advised to try upping the dosage of another medication by almost 3 times. Is that right? Following this change in medication, you state that Dan's mood spiralled out of control. You state that your mother took Dan to Broomfield A&E on 2 occasions as he was increasingly agitated, and told your mother he felt extremely unwell and, quote, would do something.
Yes.
But he wasn't admitted at that stage.
No.
Can I just check, is that 2 occasions, therefore, in March 2018 that he went to A&E?
Yes, around about the same time.
So that's after the first consultation at the Priory, but before the admission.
Do you want me to expand on that at all?
You feel free to, yes.
At the meeting with the doctor at the Priory, whilst he suggested upping the dose, the instruction was quite loose, and I think Dan was already quite unwell at that time, so he's self-medicating, and I don't know how much he took. He took a lot because he felt very unwell, and I've done many things career-wise, but at one point, a long time ago, I trained as a counsellor, and I'm the eldest sister. So the reason that it seems that I hand out advice is because within the family, to the best of my ability as a counsellor, I was trying to help Dan. So that's why I went along to the meetings initially with the doctor and so on. But so he took lots of medication, and I don't know how much he took, but even just upping his own dosage made him even more agitated. And then I had nobody to contact whilst the doctor was away on his holiday. So that was the first sort of agitating scenario, yeah.
Thank you. Dan was eventually admitted as a private patient to the Priory from the 22nd of March to the 23rd of May 2018. Was that Dan's first mental health inpatient admission?
Yes, absolutely, yes.
Whilst in the Priory, he made multiple attempts on his life, you state in your witness statement, and suffered from paranoid delusions, something that he hadn't suffered with prior to that change in medication.
No.
On the 23rd of May 2018, you received a call from the Priory to say that they were transferring him to the Lakes without notice to yourself. Is that right?
I tried to stall it, actually. I tried to stop them because it was going to be a long way away from me living in London, and my mum living sort of near Chelmsford Hospital.
Yes.
And I begged them not to take him, but they did.
Thank you. Dan was therefore on Gosfield Ward at the Lakes from the 23rd of May until the 15th of August 2018 when he was discharged.
Mm-hmm.
Can I just ask about the Priory transfer? You suggest you don't know what motivated that transfer, whether it was...
I do know, yes. They told us that Dan had private medical insurance. Because he was never sectioned, we weren't given access to his private matters, so I didn't know anything about that. But he wasn't well enough to even talk about that to them. So they said that they suspected that the funds were running out, so that he needed to be transferred over to an NHS hospital.
Right.
And I said, can't we do anything about it? It was just that going so far away was a big anxiety.
And I think you say further in your statement that you were concerned that one of the reasons for transfer was that Dan was particularly difficult, in the words that you used.
Yes, I've had no experience of mental health whatsoever, but Dan, at that point, even at that point, thought that he was in prison and that we were faking it and that it wasn't a hospital at all. And he felt that going to the Lakes Hospital was just extending his punishment, and incredibly difficult to reason with him by that stage. And I said, no, Dan, come on, let's stall this. Let's put you somewhere which is nearer and easier. And he said, no, I must accept my punishment. And off he went. Yeah.
Thank you.
But I don't know what the motivation of the hospital was. I don't know. I mean, my scant knowledge of the Priory is that there seem to be a lot of young people around with eating disorders and perhaps lesser issues. And I know, and I guess it was the doctor talking to us, but I know he'd tried multiple times already to take his life by then. And my gut feeling, which was what I had to use often, was that they found that he was uncontainable within that environment. He needed something more secure.
Thank you. You go on to state that a 48-hour follow-up call was completed by an agency staff nurse on the 16th of August 2018, and I know that you have a lot of concerns
We're
in relation
skipping to the
that.
end now, yes.
And I will return to that
Yes.
phone call shortly. Sadly, Dan died on the 17th of August 2018 by hanging in your mother's garage
Yes.
within 48 hours of discharge from the Lakes.
Yes.
Now that we've been through the timeline, I'd like to ask you some questions regarding your concerns, some of which you've touched upon already. I'm going to start with the decision to discharge Dan and the discharge process, because in your witness statement, you refer to the decision to discharge Dan as by far the worst decision that
Yes.
the clinicians made. Firstly, in your commemorative and impact account, you state that you attended a meeting at the Lakes on the 15th of August 2018 with Dan and the psychiatrist, not knowing what it was about, only to be told that Dan would be discharged that day. Had there been any indication before that meeting that Dan would be discharged in the near future?
The explanation that was given to me by the doctor, at which point I'd sort of given up hope of him ever changing his mindset, Dan, was that he, at some point in the future, would have to be discharged, and I mustn't expect too much, that it was quite likely that he would never think normally again. I was never given any explanation, medical explanation or psychiatric explanation of what was going on in Dan's head, and just by my own research came across this idea of a delusion disorder. In America they talk about it a lot, so there's a lot of information on delusion disorders, and it seemed to really make sense for Dan. He absolutely believed that he'd done something dreadful and that this was part of his punishment. And I asked the doctor, can you confirm that this is what it is, because I'm sure that's what's going on? And he said, no, we prefer not to label. I'm not going to say that. And I said, so how do we, because it's very difficult to talk to somebody with a delusion disorder, because you can't reason with them at all. And I didn't, for example, know whether to go with his ideas or to contradict them.
Yes.
So he led me, I was led by the doctor to believe that it would always be the case that he would be deluded. And so we were told, I just came to accept it, that at some point in the future he will be discharged.
Yes.
And then we were in the process of making proper plans.
Yes.
So buying him a little cottage. He couldn't live with my mother. I'm freelance, divorced, on my own. My brother-in-law and sister, he goes shooting animals, and he's got guns in his place. So we were trying to find a place for Dan to stay. So it was in the future. And we suspected that, I did, that in the next 6 months or so, he would be discharged. And he came home for visits. It was terrifying when he came home for visits because you had to watch him like a hawk. And he knew we were watching him. It was the most horrible experience. So he went out one day to the seaside and he's sitting there having a cup of tea and he wanted to go to the loo. And I had to get my partner to go with him because I thought, I don't know what he's going to do. It was so frightening the whole time. Anyway, so I work freelance. And on this particular day, so work's quite important to me. Some days I don't work at all. I had this phone call to say, you've got to come to the hospital today to have just a meeting about Dan. Nothing, no warning about why that should be. And by this time, my sister hated going to the meetings. There were a few. My brother also works freelance. He wasn't around. My mother certainly couldn't have stomached one of them. So I took it on, I went. I was the sort of main contact by that point.
Yes.
And I went along to the meeting, and it was, in my recollection, and I'm pretty sure this is true, it was myself and the doctor and my brother, no one else at all.
Yes.
Sitting, my brother to the right of me and the doctor behind a table, which is relevant because I had my phone on my lap and I went to make an emergency phone call to my sister. I didn't know what to do. He suddenly said, yes, well, we've decided he's made a lot of progress and that he's going to be discharged. So we said yes. And he said, this afternoon. And I was thrown into an absolute flat spin panic, trying with my brother sitting next to me, because all the meetings were humiliating and horrible, because they're always discussing him in front of him. But trying to contact my sister, I looked through my messages, I can't find one. I don't think I actually managed to do it, but say, Dan's coming out now. What are we going to do? We've got to make emergency plans now.
Yes.
So I had no forewarning. There was a sort of in the distance idea, but certainly not today. In fact, in 2 hours' time.
So you thought it would be at some point within 6 months, and they were in the meeting finding out it's going to be that day.
Yeah.
How did Dan himself respond to being informed that he'd be discharged that day?
He was really worried about it. He put on a play, it seemed, for the situation, with the doctor saying, so Dan, you know, how you feel good, don't you? And you're behaving. It was almost like that, you're behaving yourself, aren't you? And he said, oh, yes, I'm taking the medication. Because in the past, I don't know how I know this, but I know that he would pretend to take medication and not take medication. He wasn't the easiest of patients, I don't think. And he said, and he listed the things. He said, I'm not strong enough. But the worst thing was that he listed in his explanation as to why he wouldn't do anything was that he wasn't brave enough. And subsequently, I discovered that that was put in his notes as one of the main reasons for not discharging my brother, that he wasn't brave enough.
One of the main reasons for discharge?
It was listed as one of the reasons. Just like wildly outrageous. That he wasn't brave enough, and I thought, you know, that's crazy. So then we do you want me to continue from there, the process, or do you want me to ask you another question? I can take us
through in stages, but
So you asked me about Dan and how he felt about it. He gave that little discussion of why it would be okay.
Yes.
We had to wait a couple of hours for his drugs to be prepared. So I did contact Ruth, my sister, who lived not far, and we agreed that we would go for a walk with Dan while his medication was being prepared. And that walk in itself was quite scary, but all under my umbrella feeling, we had to cope with this, it's going to be the same. Dan, on that walk through a wood, with a dog and my sister up ahead, pointed to a mushroom and said, see that white mushroom? That could kill me. I could eat that. That would kill me. And I was like, no, Dan, taking on the entire responsibility. I'm not a psychiatrist. I have a very low-level counselling qualification from many years previously. That'll be fine. And when we got back, and then he got his medication, he left with me alone with his medication, and we were in the car park. And he said, I'm really frightened, Jane. And I said, don't worry, Dan, this is the start of a new beginning. It'll all be fine now. We'll be all right.
Did you speak at that meeting to the doctor about your concerns?
Honestly, I think I'd been so, not brainwashed, but so got used to the idea, this is as good as it gets. And at that meeting, and prior to that meeting, I was beginning to think, mental health doesn't work. There is nothing they can do for my brother, and I just have to accept that and take that responsibility on my shoulders. I really did. I mean, I'm an educated, intelligent woman. I did a lot of reading around it, and I just sort of gave up hope that the hospital would be able to do anything. So I just presumed that we would have to manage with this new, totally deluded personality. He never got back to his brilliant personality that he'd had before this all started.
Thank you.
You go on in your commemorative and impact statement to say that actually you felt that you couldn't question the clinicians because essentially they were the clinicians and they should know what was best.
I made sort of assumptions. I just thought, because it was all just, when you're in an emergency situation, your brain goes into sort of overdrive, searching around for ideas. He was, and it'll come out in my commemorative statement, incredibly popular. And he had a lot of visitors. And, like me with my middle-class accent, appears to come from a nice family. And it was a very lovely, loving family. And I just came to the conclusion, this doctor thinks... There was a horrible thing that happened while we were in hospital. Dan was in hospital, where one of the patients threatened him. And it was just, there were awful things that were happening within the hospital. And so I just thought the doctor thinks he's going to be better off at home. Yes. And there's nothing they can do from here, so he's going to be better off going home. Subsequently, I've met people who've had friends who've been in, a friend of mine has got a brother who's in hospital and he can be treated and he could have been treated. But up to that point, I was thinking he's a useless case and they can't do anything for him.
You also state in your witness statement that at that meeting, Dan said he thought he would be okay. The drugs weren't working yet, but they might do.
Yes.
Was that something that the psychiatrist explored with him as
No,
to what?
No. It really wasn't. It was quite shockingly sort of normal, No, it'll be fine. It was just a sort of a push out the door, really. And Dan was reassuring the doctor, yes, I'm sure the drugs will work eventually. It was like crazy.
Yes.
But we didn't have any access to drugs. I didn't know about drugs. And because he was never sectioned, I didn't know what the drugs were. I just absolutely trusted the doctor.
And you've touched upon the comment, and in fact it's recorded in Dan's notes, that he wouldn't be brave enough to take his own life. You further state in your witness statement that was the only reassurance that you were given in that meeting, really, that nothing was going to happen.
That his drugs might eventually work. I already knew, or thought I knew, that he's never going to change anyway, because I'd been advised that by the doctor. And because I asked that question, I always used to go along with notes to ask the doctor. And I've got, I'm quite good at keeping notes. I've got all those notes. And I specifically said, is what can we expect, the prognosis, what can we expect? And he said, no, it's not going to change. So, I just went out thinking, there was some mention of some sort of community contact that we would be getting.
Yes.
But that never happened. Nobody ever contacted us.
No. And just finally on the comment of not being brave enough, just so that we're clear, is that something that the doctor was saying to Dan and Dan was essentially repeating that? Or how did that conversation go?
That was part of Dan's explanation to her. Yes, don't worry, doctor. I mean, I think we're probably all a bit people-pleasing in my family. We like to sort of do the right thing. And he was trying to help the doctor.
Right. Thank you.
Coming out, it was a ridiculous thing to say.
Yes.
But on reflection, know, and he tried so many times. It's sort of, maybe he was trying to convince himself, I don't know.
Thank you. In your witness statement, I'm at paragraph 18, if you'd like to refer to it, Jane. You state that you don't understand why the clinicians didn't take into consideration that Dan had tried to take his life the very week he was discharged by jumping from a high wall within the hospital grounds. Were you aware of that incident at the time of the meeting on the 15th of August?
No.
When did you learn about that incident?
Very recently. And if I had known that at the time, maybe that would have triggered something more extreme in me.
So that incident wasn't discussed at the meeting?
Absolutely not, no. I thought that had gone... I mean, I'm sure it was even mentioned, you know, he hadn't tried recently. He tried so many times, it was sort of, you know, almost a bit of a joke, really. You know, he constantly, imaginatively tried. But at that meeting, it was sort of... I was made to feel that that phase we'd passed that phase now, and that I certainly didn't have any idea that he was going to try again. But you see, you know, with the mushrooms and things, you know, it's really confusing, really.
Yes.
In the moment of the meeting, when it was discussed, the fact that he tried really recently was definitely not brought up, because I would have wanted to have talked about that.
Yes.
There and then, with the doctor, with Dan. You know, well, you've done it a week ago, Dan, that's not... But the mushroom thing, I just thought he was sort of toying with us a bit, and... Well, obviously not. I mean, a lot of things sort of reflectively, I thought, yeah, I know you were trying to tell us, and I wasn't listening, because I was listening to what the doctor had advised, which was, he's always going to be deluded.
Something else that you touch upon in your witness statement in relation to the discharge meeting is that the clinicians knew that your mother was 83 and vulnerable, and in your view it was wholly inappropriate to discharge him to live with her, and you also had concerns about her safety if he had a psychotic episode. Firstly, do you know if anyone from the ward spoke to your mother regarding the decision to discharge Dan into her
I don't think
care?
anybody ever spoke to her.
And you say the clinicians knew that she was 83 and vulnerable. Is that a conversation that you'd had with them?
I don't know quite how that information was imparted to the hospital, but what I do know was there was no discussion at that meeting about where he was going to go at all. It was just like, over to you, whatever you was. And because we, as I've explained, you know, we didn't want him to go to my sister and brother-in-law, and he couldn't come to me. I got a job starting the next day. So we just thought that over, you know, very short term, he should go back to my mum. Me thinking that he was safe to do so, that the drugs were not quite working, but they would be working. But on reflection, I believe that she was very vulnerable. That if she had interrupted him when he was trying to take his life, that could have been lethal.
Yes.
Because he was totally deluded. And I dread to think what might have happened. And it was never looked at. And I've mentioned somewhere, which sounds very sort of melodramatic, but, you know, that if Dan had been a Romanian puppy about to be adopted, they check out, have you got a fence? Have you got a cat? Have you got children? Have you got these things? And then my equally, if it was a medical... And I looked after him when he was home, and he got a terrible temperature. But it was okay, because I had a hotline that I could ring, and I could say, and I did. I said, it's really, really hot. But there was nothing given to me as backup at all.
What was your mother frightened of him?
Oh, that's a really good question. She relied, there was me back up all the time, and she started to... she was panicked the first time when he wanted to go to A&E, because there was something in when he said to her, I don't know what I'm going to do. There was a slight feeling then of, I could hurt you. And that was never said, but he was out of control. Also, when he went to stay that weekend with my mum, her even older sister was there, so there were two of them. And she thought again, the sort of white coat thing, he's coming out of hospital, he's better now. But the very first night, she rang me and she said, Dan's really not feeling very happy. He feels very concerned. Can you... Mum relies on me. I'm like the family therapist. Can you give him a bit of reassurance? So I spoke to him and he said, I feel horrible, Jane. And I said, don't you worry. I've had an operation. I've been in hospital. You do feel a bit disorientated when you come out of hospital. You'll be fine. And I never was once told, watch him like a hawk, because especially when suicidal tendency patients are discharged from hospital, those first 48 hours are crucial. And you need to watch him and you need to be aware. And he gave us so many signs. When we were in the car park, he said to me, I'm frightened, Jane. He looked at the mushrooms. He got me to take him he wanted to go for a drink at McDonald's suddenly and get a sort of salted caramel milkshake. I said, well, that's a bit strange, Dan. But now on reflection, I know it was like a sort of, he knew what he was going to do. And it was like going to his execution, having a last meal. And then Nick, I can't remember, and I keep forgetting to ask Nick, mental block, my brother, he said something strange to him too. But he knew exactly what he was going to do. And he planned it because my mum she's quite into her own appearance and looks after herself and has a hairdresser come every Thursday morning. And he knew that the hairdresser would be there so she wouldn't hear.
Thank you. You state in your witness statement that it's recorded in relation to that 15th of August meeting that family members were present and agreed to the discharge to your mother's home, but it was just you and you didn't agree to the
Ruth
discharge.
didn't want to come, Nick was off. No, it was just me.
Do you know whether other family members were notified about that meeting, or was it you
It was
were
a real
telephoned
quick one. You've got to
Yes.
come now.
Yes.
There was nobody else, no. And also, I didn't know what it was about. I didn't know he's going to be discharged today. We would have made some sort of plans. I mean, at the end of my commemorative statement, I read one by his very, very good friend, Richard Railton. And as Richard said, he could have come and stayed with me. It was sort of panic stations. What are we going to do with Dan for the next few days till we sort him out?
Another thing that you point out in your witness statement is that there wasn't a qualified nurse in the discharge meeting.
Not in my recollection.
But the investigation seems to suggest that there were 2 qualified nurses available, and so you query why
but they weren't there.
Yes.
No. It was like a little sort of cosy chat, just the 3 of us.
You also query why the care coordinator didn't meet with you before Dan was discharged, because that was in the discharge plan.
No, nobody. We were just told that at some point during the week there would be somebody get in touch, and it was very vague.
Yes.
No one specifically.
You've referenced planning that you were doing as a family with a view to Dan being discharged over the period of 6 months, at some point within that 6 months. Do you recall anything that was within Dan's formal discharge plan that you were presented with that day?
We weren't given a formal discharge plan. I was given nothing in writing whatsoever.
And I think you said to us earlier that it was 2 hours between you finding out that Dan was being discharged and you actually leaving the building with him to take him
just
to your
in
mother's
time to get the medication sorted. It wasn't for anything else other than that.
So between that meeting and you leaving with Dan, the only conversations really with anyone else were in relation to his medication, is that right?
I didn't have a conversation about it. We went away. I drove him to Ruth. We went for a walk, and then I came back for him to collect his medication. And we didn't talk to anybody else. He just collected his medication, and that was that.
Was there any suggestion at any stage that they needed the bed?
No, that would have been horrendous. No, I don't know why. I just thought, I don't know, I think this guy, the doctor, thought, oh, well, this is how I read it. You know, not much we can do for him. He'd be better off with his happy family.
Thank you.
You've made reference to some sort of contact with a community health contact person. You say in your witness statement you were given no details and had no contact details. Does that mean Dan obviously didn't have those details either?
I don't know. Because I think there was a mention at some point of him having had a phone call made to him, but his phone was taken away by the police and we didn't have access to his phone. And by that, I mean, he never stopped being in this strange mindset. So if somebody had contacted him, well, it wouldn't have made any difference, actually. The family were not involved whatsoever.
So you didn't know when that contact was supposed to come or who from in terms of their role?
No. It was a bit like I was on an ice rink and it's like, whoosh, off you go. Now you're on your own.
You've already mentioned to us your concerns in relation to the lack of information and guidance that you were provided with at Dan's, at the time of Dan's discharge. You've referenced both in relation to assessing whether your mother's home was suitable for him to be discharged to, and also in relation to warning signs for you to look out for. Is there anything further that you would like to say on that lack of information?
No, I just, you try and, I'm like everybody who's on my side of this world wants changes to be made so that these things don't happen again. And I really felt that there could have been 2 simple forms asking the patient, are you happy to go home? What are you feeling? Are you sure that your medication is working? How have you been recently? And that would have been them. And are you happy about where you're going? But on our side, we could have done, and then looking into where he was going. Is he going to a safe environment? Tick that box. But for us, these are, be aware, because this is a risky time, just as if he'd come home with a heart operation or something else wrong with him, cancer. And then if you have any concerns at all, because you should be on guard, then this is a hotline that you can ring. This is a number. Something.
Yes.
Rather than feeling abandoned.
Yes. So essentially 2 comprehensive and properly implemented discharge checklists.
Really simple. You'd have it after a dental operation, Just this, if you bleed, this is what you do. Don't worry, contact us. Nothing. Never heard from them. I think there was a phone call made sometime down the line as a sort of cursory, sorry to hear type phone call. But nobody contacted me, and I was the prime person by this stage and had been for some time.
Do you have a view as to how that information should be provided, whether that's face-to-face meeting, a leaflet, website links?
No, definitely not just a piece of paper plonked in front. I think people don't read leaflets. I don't know. I'm not very good at reading leaflets. Just sort of on that day, these things should be checked.
Is it fair to say then that given that there was an apparent lack of a discharge plan, you don't think that you were sufficiently equipped to support Dan in the community?
Not at all.
I'm going to turn now to talk about medication, if I may. You've touched briefly upon it. We know that Dan's first consultation at the Priory was March 2018, where the medication change came. And you've also touched upon the fact that there was reference to try upping the dosage and actually what that meant. You went with Dan to that appointment, is that right?
Yes.
And you were physically in the room when he was having the conversation?
Him,
You say in your witness statement that Dan increased the dosage as per the advice. I think you indicated
the advice
earlier
was
that
try this, try that. He was really not capable of fathoming that one out, really. That she got a drawer somewhere and he got a hold of that. I mean, he was very much in need of proper help. He was feeling a bit frantic by the time he got into the Priory. He'd had sleep issues.
Yes.
Terrible, and those sleep issues sort of spiralled out of control.
You say that there was a lack of proper guidance and support from the clinician at the Priory because he then went on holiday for 2 weeks with essentially no handover to anybody else.
No,
Is
that's
that
right.
You go on to say that Dan wasn't given any specialist advice on the effects of different medications, when they start working, and whether he should be careful with mixing medications.
Not in my hearing.
As far as you're aware, was he given that advice at any stage before he died?
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I presumed once he was at the hospital they would have, measured it and given whatever doses they thought were necessary.
You've touched upon the fact that Dan was never sectioned whilst he was an inpatient. And you state in your witness statement that you as a family feel that staff should have considered sectioning Dan at the Priory when he tried to take his life.
Well, my scant knowledge is that if he had been, we could perhaps have had more information about him, because the whole confidentiality issue may have meant that we were given less information than we would otherwise have been given.
Right.
I guess, I don't know. I mean, as I say, I'm new to this whole thing, really, so...
Yes. What you say in your witness statement is that you believe if he had been sectioned, he would have been informed about his mental health more substantively. Are you referring there actually then to you as a family?
As a family, we perhaps if he'd been sectioned, we would have been given more information about him. But because he wasn't, maybe it was to do. Some of it was to do with confidentiality.
Yes.
I don't know why they never did.
You go on to say that this is something that your brother raised at a meeting with the Trust on the 13th of September 2024 after Dan had died. But you actually didn't get a response as to why he was never sectioned.
No. It was a very defensive... I tried over the years to raise all the issues that I was unhappy with, and I wrote to various different people, never got any response. And I have a friend who is a medical registrar, and she's like, I was at school with her, she's a very good friend, and she knew Dan, and she said, oh, keep trying, Jane, because I think I've heard that there's things happening at the moment. And I got in touch with went around some email I sent hit home, and immediately I had a phone call from a solicitor representing EPUT, and I thought, that's interesting. They're obviously worried that things aren't right, that things are going wrong. And a Zoom meeting was organised on the 13th of September with my brother Nick and I, and there was a panel. I don't know exactly what the job titles were. There was definitely the lawyer, and then there were two medical personnel, and we put to them our concerns, and I certainly did. And everything I said, they said, they talked to me as if I was talking about ancient history, Victorian times. Oh, well, yeah, but it's all changed now. Yeah, and it was bad, but it's not the same now. It's all changed. It would never happen nowadays. And so I felt sort of almost put in my place, really, belittled that some years down the line I should be complaining about stuff because that was then and this is now, and it's not the same nowadays. And you asked me a question, and I've sort of about the sectioning and
yes.
And in that meeting, it was just felt very defensive. One of the medical personnel said, "Oh yeah, but he was being properly medicated," and I said, "Well, it wasn't working then, was it?"
Yes. You touched upon then the fact that at that meeting you were being told, well, everything has changed now. Were you ever provided with any specific information as to what changes had been put in place?
No. And I don't know whether, I think it's appropriate to say that when I'm jumping around a bit, but because of my friend, who's the medical registrar, she helped me before the inquest to write our concerns. And at the inquest, my document that Jane had read through with me was presented to the coroner. And she said several significant things to the coroner, but one of the things she did was read my statement to the representative, And she said, look, this is a catalogue here of things that have got wrong. What are you going to do about it? And they said, well, first of all, we're very sorry. And then we will go through all of these points. We will make sure changes are made, and we will keep in touch with the family, and we will let them know how these changes are being made. And they never contacted me, ever.
Is it right
Didn't hear anything.
Sorry, I didn't mean to
Sorry.
interrupt. Is it right that they promised the coroner that they'd contact you within 48 hours with an update on...
If I put that earlier on, I probably remember that, and it might have been one of my notes, but they did, but 40, never. They never contacted me. So we never knew. The whole episode made me feel there is no point to mental health care.
Just turning, if we can, to talk about Dan's diagnoses for a second.
Yes.
In terms of formal diagnoses that Dan received, sitting here today, do you know what he was formally what conditions
I've seen that it was mentioned somewhere that he did suffer from delusion disorder, but as far as I'm concerned, that was my idea. I stuffed that one in, and I'm a lay person. I think that there are other things mentioned, but certainly it's all sort of new information,
yes.
Part of the lot of information that we've not had up until now.
So we can go through them, but first of all, you state in your statement that you feel Dan's symptoms weren't understood by the clinicians treating him, and you refer to the fact that he was constantly paranoid,
yes,
and thought that he was a prisoner, essentially.
Yes, he did, yes.
And was that at the Priory and the Lakes?
Well, right from fairly early on he did. But by the time we got to, there was a meeting after about a week of him being discharged from the Priory, and I was at that meeting with the doctor, and it was a really disturbing meeting because it seemed clear that they hadn't got or hadn't read Dan's notes, because the doctor... Dan, it was all around the sort of Me Too time. So he was very popular, always had lovely girlfriends. They were all the ones that visited him in the hospital. He started thinking he'd given people HPV viruses, sexually transmitted viruses. And then he even came up with the idea that he might be a rapist. And during that meeting, it was spiralling out of control. In the beginning, I was trying to reason with him before he flew into it. This is just it's a nonsense, Dan. He described what led me to think these things. But nevertheless, the doctor turned to Dan and said, so, are you a rapist? And I just thought, whoa, you're just buying into his delusion. That's just madness, for want of a better word. That's crazy. You've obviously not read that he's not under arrest, he's not a criminal, he's done nothing.
Yes.
It was really shocking.
And you refer in your witness statement to the fact that you were surprised to find out that not all of Dan's medical notes made it over with him in the transfer to the Lakes, just a few documents, essentially.
I'm looking, and I've been along to some of the earlier meetings, and I'm trying to understand what's been going wrong, and it seems like there's a massive problem with notes flying all over the place,
yes. Notes
not being kept, notes inadequately written in the first place by people who are not in the right position to make them. It seems a huge issue. I never saw anything in writing before when Dan was in hospital.
Just turning back to any formal diagnosis, you helpfully set out in your witness statement that the investigation report states that Dan was diagnosed with anxiety and depression, but that isn't something that you as a family were ever informed prior to his death.
No.
You go on to state that he was under the care of the specialist psychosis team, but again, you weren't aware that he was ever diagnosed with schizophrenia or bipolar disorder.
Not at all, no.
And finally, you touch on a delusional disorder, which you've explained to us. That's something that you raised, and you were told, no, we don't label things. But actually, looking at Dan's notes and the investigation, it appears that he was diagnosed with that condition. You go on to state that as a family, had you been aware of any of those formal diagnoses, then you could have been informed about what to look out for, how to cope when his mental health deteriorated, and what questions to ask to understand how best to support Dan.
I think if we had been fully aware of the situation, we would have said, we are sorry, but we don't think we can cope with him at home at the moment. Until he's further stabilised and we're assured that he's not going to try to do this immediately.
Keeping on the topic of lack of communication, in your commemorative and impact account, you explain an occasion where you were asked to go to Broomfield Hospital with Dan for an MRI scan after an attempt on his life. And what you say in your witness statement is that from that point on, you were always afraid that he would never stop trying. And as far as you're concerned, he never returned to the personality that he had before those delusions. When you had that realisation, was that something that you were able to discuss with any of the clinicians?
Yeah, because I said, is he always going to be like this? And I was told, no, I just thought, is he ever going to get better? And I was told, no, we just have to cope with the fact that this is him now, and it's quite likely he will never return to the way he was before.
In your witness statement, you say that you don't understand why Dan's attempts on his life and threats, for example, informing staff at the Lakes that he had previously made 14 attempts on his life.
He was writing a book about it.
Writing a book. You don't understand why that wasn't taken seriously and why you as a family weren't ever informed. Is that right?
We knew that we weren't told blow by blow. It was almost as if it was the sort of thing that they didn't want to burden us with. But we were aware that he had tried. I mean, I was very shocked when he first went into the Priory and they told us he'd tried almost immediately there.
Yes.
But by the time we got to, that was still at the Priory. I had to go to the Broomfield Hospital, and I went with a nurse and the taxi driver and me in the back. And by that time, I was frightened that if he got out the car, I knew that he was like a constant risk by that point.
Yes. You've mentioned already the meetings that you attended on the ward and how awful you felt that those were. How often were those meetings taking place? Do you know?
I don't remember. I went to perhaps 2 or 3. They were perhaps monthly. I don't remember how often they were. My sister went to one. She didn't go again because she just thought it was horrible. It was just a lot of clinicians around my brother as if he didn't exist, really. And she found it awful. So one of the reasons I've stressed that in my document is that I feel that I have compiled this not as an individual, but also with some of the thoughts of my brother and sister, because it's not the Jane show. It's us as a family and how we try to cope. And my sister found that particularly distressing. I didn't feel as strongly about that, but it did. It was odd, those meetings with him sitting there while we discussed him around him as if he didn't have a right to discuss himself.
Did Dan ever discuss with you how he felt about those meetings?
No.
I'm going to turn next to the transfer. I think we've covered most ground here. Transfer from the Priory to the Lakes.
Yes.
So it's your understanding that the private healthcare was coming to an end. Also, perhaps Dan was a little difficult. They're the words that you've used.
Yes.
So he was transferred to the Lakes. Not all of his documentation made it across with him. In terms of the time from your mother's home and from your home, you made reference earlier to the fact that the Lakes was much further away.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes.
You go on to say in your witness statement that following that transfer and the lack of input from you as a family, you felt totally let down.
Yeah.
Would you like to say any more about that?
I just think we were, I just said abandoned. I think it was sort of like over to you. And I sort of felt sorry for the medical health system. I thought, oh, well, you know, it's like magic, really. They can't, got to the stage where I just got desperate. They can't do anything. You know, he's a lost case. And I know that they can cure cancers, and I know that they can sort out people with heart conditions. But I guess the British, I mean, being honest, the British mental health system can't, it's more complicated perhaps dealing with mental health, and they can't cope with mental health patients. They don't know what to do with them. And that's what it felt like with my brother.
Yes, thank you. Turning to the follow-up care when Dan was discharged from the Lakes, and in particular the 48-hour call that he received, you question the quality of that call in your witness statement. Because the investigation report concludes that there was very little information available in relation to that call. The information wasn't recorded contemporaneously. The staff member entry was made on behalf of that staff member by somebody else. And you're concerned that it wasn't actual follow-up, it was essentially a tick box
I didn't
exercise.
know at the time that I wasn't aware of there having been a call. And because I never had access to Dan's phone, and then Dan's phone was taken away by the police, I didn't know that there had been. I've seen that it was recorded that there was, but I wasn't aware of that call, and he didn't mention a call.
Yes.
And my mother, who he was living with, you know, when he was anxious, that call was never mentioned.
And I think you go on in your witness statement to say you're concerned as to whether the person making that call even had access to Dan's medical records.
Yeah, I know nothing about that call.
Thank you.
I mean, I think if it had been handled properly, it would have been a call to the family as well as he wasn't capable of, they must have known, of even handling a call. He wasn't the appropriate person to be dealing with.
Thank you. Turning then to the quality of that investigation report, you state that it's incorrect for the report to record that Dan had a good period of leave with his sisters without any concerns, and you provide the examples that you've just given to us in relation to pointing out mushrooms and also reference to guns at your brother-in-law's property. Were you able to report those concerns to any staff members at all after those periods of leave?
We didn't really have much contact with them. I mean, I just, you know, I can't take responsibility for what happened on myself, and I refuse to. But I felt, okay, well, if this is the way forward, let's look at the bright side. Like one day Dan played Scrabble. We play Scrabble as a family. Maybe that's a good sign. Maybe I should say to the daughter, oh yes, he is doing things like playing Scrabble. So I stuck a few positives in, because it's really, it's like suddenly not believing in Father Christmas or something. It's like only afterwards, when it all went horribly wrong, did I know that all those things were signs. But at the time I was trying to think, okay, we've got to cope with this. He's still going to be deluded, so we've got to make it work.
Yes.
But I remember, and there was varying degrees of panic. I mean, Jeremy, my brother-in-law, who wouldn't mind his name being mentioned, I think that's fine, he's got a locked gun cabinet. And one day we were sitting in the garden on a beautiful sunny day, and suddenly Jeremy shouted, "Get away!" And Dan was trying to find the key. So there were things happening all the time. And we were just trying to cope with it, really.
And in terms of any periods of leave that Dan did have, were you informed about those in advance and able to prepare for them?
Well, they were just sort of like outings. He didn't ever stay away. He was sort of taken out for a couple of hours, or I don't remember him staying. I might be incorrect in that, but I don't remember him staying away. They were just, and it was, as I say, like the time when he wanted to go off to the loo. It was like dealing with a dangerous dog or something. It was like, oh God. And he knew, and he said, "You're watching me, aren't you?" And we did have to watch him, because it was a feeling that it was imminent that he would try and do something else.
In relation to the investigation report, you say that it's insufficient because it didn't take into account what you went through as a family at
Yeah.
all. And in fact, you weren't contacted as part of the investigation,
No.
whereas it says that you
No.
were. Would you like to say anything further about that?
Well, because ultimately our wish is that those changes that I was promised in that Zoom meeting last year will be made. At the very least, I would like to know that somebody else doesn't have to go through what we've gone through.
Thank you. And just touching on that Zoom meeting, I think it's right, isn't it, that you emailed the Trust on the 18th of April 2024, over 5 years later, asking, has anything been done in response to the issues raised by the coroner? You received a response on the 11th of July, stating that you would be provided with an update by the 19th of July. Did you receive an update by the 19th of July?
I don't think so, no, I don't. No, we didn't receive anything substantial. And then there was this just apology and the meeting will be, we thought it was funny, Friday the 13th of September, so I remember that date.
Yes.
And then we had a Zoom meeting on that day.
And I think you've answered this already, but did you leave that meeting feeling reassured that everything
No.
had been addressed since Stan died?
No, I thought they're frightened because they know that actually big mistakes have been made and now people are being called to account.
Jane, I'd now like to go through your recommendations for change. Before I do, can I just touch upon your suggestion of a checklist, or two checklists, in fact, again? Is there anything further that you'd like to say in relation to that recommendation, that there be two
No, because I
checklists?
think it's, I mean, the other people I know, because I've talked to other people who've had similar family things happen, and I think Dan's is quite a simple story, really. And I think the mistakes that were made were quite fundamental and could so easily be changed. And I don't understand, I've worked in lots of different areas, why such simple things couldn't be done.
Yes.
And they are, it's like the medical side is more grounded and more efficient and perhaps better funded, but it's simple things that in our case I think could have saved his life.
Thank you. Amanda, please can we have paragraph 35.1 onwards on the screen from page 8. Thank you. Jane, you might feel that actually we've touched upon all of your recommendations,
Yeah.
but I'll just give you a moment to cast your eye over
Thank you.
them.
Yeah. I mean, I also think that in addition to that, is just have some sort of contact,
Yes.
somebody to communicate with when you're worried.
Yes. I have two questions arising from your recommendations. One is, you say in your witness statement that staff didn't make any attempts to understand Dan and learn about his likes and dislikes, and you feel that he may have benefited from more tailored treatment. Is that right?
Well, yes, hopefully, yes.
And
I mean, I can't make judgments about psychiatric care because I don't understand it, but
yes.
It felt like he was slightly sort of pushed on one side in terms of his mental health.
Thank you.
And I think it was sort of inappropriate that it came to be relied on that I should be the one making the suggestions.
Yes.
Like I trying quite hard to get him to have some sort of talking therapy, and he never had that.
No.
And I just was so out of my depth talking to him and him saying these bizarre things, and it's really hard. You don't know whether to run with it, and he'd say, "Oh, you're tricking me. This is a prison. This isn't a hospital." And I don't know whether. Yes, no. It's a really hard one to deal with, but because of this curious lack of explanation from the hospital and us putting things back in, it felt like I was being relied on, and I thought, okay, then I'll have to manage.
Thank you. Amanda, can we take those recommendations down, please? Thank you, Jane. I don't have any further questions for you at the moment. Chair, do you have any questions?
No, I don't.
Thank you. Jane, as I've indicated, you have also provided your commemorative and impact account in relation to Dan. I understand you would now like to read that out. Can I check, would you like a break before we proceed, or are you happy to?
I suppose I could have sort of 5 minutes, actually.
Shall we have a 10-minute break?
One. Yeah, thank you.
Chair, may we have a 10-minute break?
Yeah,
Thank you.
Of course, 10 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Jane, whenever you're ready, please go ahead and read your commemorative and impact statement in relation to your brother Dan.
There's two. The second one is Dan's friend, so I'm reading it on his behalf as well. And in my statement, there is information there. It's a sort of compilation. My brother and sister have also put their thoughts in, so it's family representative rather than just me. And I hope I can do it. My name is Jane Mayer, and this statement concerns my brother Daniel Fairman, or Dan as we called him. My brother was one of 4 children in a very close, happy family. Dan was a lively, charming child with a lot of energy. He had a real sense of humour and could charm everyone. Dan always had lots of friends, and our mum was very hospitable, and I remember that once he invited the whole cricket team home for tea. To our sister Ruth and I, he could just seem like the annoying younger brother, though our relationships with him grew as we all matured. When we were children, my parents weren't all that well off, so we never went abroad, but I really remember enjoying happy family holidays together to the Isle of Wight and Wales. As adults, the 4 of us siblings chose to go again with our mum and dad and take our children this time to have exactly the same family holidays in the places we'd been so happy as children. Dan went to St John's School in Billericay. He was a popular student and left school with 10 O-levels, and then he attended King Edward V Grammar School in Chelmsford, where he obtained 3 A-levels. He obtained a degree in estate management from London South Bank University. He worked in London with commercial property firms Howell Brooks and later G.L. Hearn. He focused on identifying and acquiring restaurant sites for the major chains, including Prezzo and Pizza Express. In a letter of condolence that we received from a colleague from G.L. Hearn, it said of Dan, he could be hugely mercurial, but always there with gentleness and calm when you really needed him. Following G.L. Hearn, Dan worked at Strathmore Property Developments Limited, still in the restaurant sector, but this time with an emphasis on development. There was quite a big age gap between Dan and our youngest brother, Nick, so we were 4. So their deeper friendship really developed in adulthood and became particularly close. Dan didn't have children or a family home, so he spent a lot of time not only working with Nick, but staying with him, his wife Sally, and their son Will. When Dan started to become ill, it was Nick who struggled to help him because they were working together, and horrendously it was Nick who found his lifeless body and tried to revive him, knowing as he did so that it was too late. In 2011, Dan and Nick decided to work together, promoting land for residential development. Their area of search was East Anglia. Land promotion is a long-winded and stressful business. A promoter spends considerable time and money speculatively trying to secure planning permission for housing development, usually with great resistance from both local councils and residents. With his charming nature, Dan was very good at identifying and securing new opportunities by convincing landowners that he was honest, skillful and tenacious. My brothers, Nick and Dan, and our father, Eddie, shared a love of sport. Like our mum and Dad, Dan was a keen tennis player, and the three men used to love watching football together on a Sunday, while Ruth, my sister, Mum and I were in the kitchen cooking lunch. My parents had a long and happy marriage and were together from their late teens until my dad died in his 70s. At the inquest into Dan's death, which took place in January 2019, the coroner stated that the cause of his suicide was a consequence entirely of his mental health. She considered, there were no sort of background triggers at all. She considered that it was clear that he'd had a very happy family background and personal life. The coroner agreed that there had been serious errors with my brother's care, i.e. put, which I've mentioned. Dan was passionate about nature and wildlife. As an adult, he managed deer herds in Essex and Norfolk on behalf of a number of different landowners. He held a firearms licence for over 20 years. In order to obtain his licence, it would have been necessary for him not to have had a history of mental health problems declared by his doctor, and he never did. Dan was incredibly caring of other people and had lots of friends who he was really generous to. He really made a big effort to keep in touch with all of his friends and was so loved and respected by them that over 250 people came to his funeral. Dan travelled extensively around the world and had made a number of friends overseas. I'm not sure I can do it.
Jane,
I can. Some of whom attended his funeral. I recall consoling 3 German men, these great big beefy men who were crying at his graveside. My sister and I had to reassure them that it was okay to cry. Dan was always asked to be best man at his friends' weddings. He was known to give particularly funny speeches. And the next bit's quite a tough one, but I'll do that and then it'll be fine. One of my favourite memories of my wonderful brother is that on my birthday I had a party and Dan put on some Cajun music. He grabbed me by the hand and then danced me round and round in a wild dance, and it was wonderful. I so admired his love of life and of seizing the moment. Dan didn't have children, so he gave all his paternal affection to his niece and nephews and his best friend's children. In return, they all absolutely adored Dan with his exuberant personality and fun-loving ways. He always wanted to put fun even into the most ordinary situations. He was godfather to several children and gave each of them and his niece and nephews individual attention. He truly cared about them. He was interested in them. They have all been devastated by his death. I was born in 1958 and Dan was 6 years younger than me. My relationship with him really grew when we were adults. We both lived in London, while our younger brother and sister lived near our parents and were more conventional about their choice of lifestyle. Dan once told me he thought we were the wild ones and the black sheep of the family. We were not really wild, though. We just chose to live further away from home, and we're both fun-loving extroverts with lively social lives. I always felt uplifted when I was with Dan. I'm proud that he was my brother. He was charming and he was a joy to be with, and we used to have really good times together, having a drink in the pub or a meal out together. I'm a makeup artist, and I remember making pixie ears for him and his best friend Dickie to wear to a fancy dress party. To prepare for the makeup, Dan and I went to a makeup shop for glue and prosthetic pieces, and I remember at the checkout he wouldn't let me purchase a bag for the lots of little bits that we had purchased and had to carry. He was insistent that having a bag was environmentally bad, and I was impressed by his concern. This was way before such things became an issue, an environmental concern. Dan was a wonderful man. He was so generous, so funny. He loved to entertain everyone at every opportunity. wild things. For my 50th birthday, he presented me with a huge wheel of cheese, which was a strange one. At Christmas one year, he had a re-gifting theme, and he gave our grandma my mobile phone and wrapped up Mum's old lipstick to give back to Mum. There was never a dull moment when Dan was there. As I was the eldest sister, the oldest sibling, and I had studied counselling, Dan respected my opinions on personal issues. When Dan started to become ill, he confided in me. Nick was always trying to support him in his depression, but he was looking everywhere for help and had been to various alternative therapists to try to make himself feel better. So actually, it was me that said, you've got to come, we've got to sort this with one person, we've got to go to the right person, not just flounder around looking for help. Following a tick bite, he'd contracted Lyme disease, and we never knew whether that was really what it caused it all, but after that he'd been prescribed antibiotics for it, and he started to have terrible problems sleeping. He tried sleeping pills, but it got worse, and he became extremely anxious about the insomnia. He started to feel paranoid, and this progressed into delusions. These became so intense that he began to lose in touch with reality. I tried to reassure him, but he became convinced that I and everyone else was trying to trick him. My brother had died on 17th of August 2018 by hanging in the garage of my mother's house within 48 hours after he had been discharged as an inpatient from the Lakes Hospital. When Nick told me what had happened, I was hysterical with grief. I couldn't breathe for sobbing. I was a passenger in a car, and a strange thing happened. In that moment, I thought I might get out of the car and walk into the traffic myself. At Dan's funeral, the priest, we've got a lovely, I'm not particularly religious, but we have a really lovely priest, and he said that losing a sibling is visceral. It gets you in the gut. He was our flesh and blood. Our sister Ruth says it is as if we've been cursed. We will never truly be happy again. Our happy family has been smashed. There will always be a bit of gloom in the corner of our eyes. I find it incredibly painful to think about my brother. I cannot go to his grave. There is a nightmare element to losing someone from suicide. It will take me a long, long time to think happily about my dear, funny, delightful brother, and that in itself is a curse. The worst thing, I think, is that he was abandoned with no warning, and no advice was given to his unprepared family when he was still clearly ill. This was obvious to his family at the time and clear from his medical records. I heard recently from the nurse who had his paperwork, which I've mentioned earlier, in front of her as she was reviewing the case on behalf of EPUT, and she reasoned that everything was different now, that the hospital has different systems and the same mistakes would not happen again. And the nurse mentioned that Dan was given the right medication when he was being treated, and he so very clearly wasn't. This is a piece by his friend Dickie, his best mate, who was really horribly affected. So it's Dickie's words. Dan was my best friend. He was my best man at my wedding, and soon became arguably closer friends with my wife. Such was his likability and unique ability to entertain as well as charm. He was also an amazing godfather to my oldest son. We met on the first day. We both attended South Bank Polytechnic when I saw this good-looking, sun-tanned lad sitting alone at the back of the theatre auditorium wearing a big puffer ski jacket. He had a big quiff of a fringe that almost covered his face. We immediately bonded, and from that point onwards we ended up living together in numerous properties across London. We travelled the world on numerous holidays from Cape Town to Barbados to Sydney, and we also played lots of sport together, albeit we were both very average across the board. Whilst I would accept this fact, Dan was legendary at trying to introduce science and technique into all his pastimes in the belief and hope it would make him better. In truth, his sporting abilities were average, though he was very much world-class in talking up his game. If you were to ask anyone that knew him what his best trait was, they would all say that his ability to make people laugh and entertain was legendary. He had a wicked sense of humour that only made sense when you knew him. We once stayed in a holiday cottage in Suffolk that had a photo montage of hundreds of small photos blended together hanging in the kitchen. He knew that I was coming back a few months later to the same cottage with my parents, so unbeknownst to anyone whilst we were staying, he took the glass off the frame, inserted a small cut-down photo of my dad, and stuck a small boy sitting on my dad's lap. all in the hope that when we visited a month later, my father, being the curious type, would browse the montage in this holiday cottage and spot himself. I thought my dad was having a heart attack when I heard the roar months later when he spotted himself in amongst the hundreds of small photos that made up the montage. Every parent, particularly mothers of his friends and girlfriends, loved Dan as he made people laugh. He was legendary at dressing up for fancy dress parties, plus he loved to drop in unannounced when undertaking his many trips around the UK looking for development sites. We played so much sport together and had so many extraordinarily happy times. He tended to lose at most things he played, albeit was obsessive at getting better and just had great chat. The last game of cricket, and indeed the last he ever bowled, at Sheen Common, was excruciating to experience as he suffered from the bowling equivalent of golfing yips. I think it was 13, probably 14 balls before the umpire put him out of his misery and called over. I personally feel I let him down by not being with him the weekend he was released from hospital. I was away with friends, but I don't believe I was made aware of his release either until the day or possibly the time he was actually home. I was a regular visitor whilst he was at hospital, when he also often tried to convince me that he wasn't a danger to himself given he was taking his drugs, which was not always the case. Plus he would say he wasn't strong enough to self-harm, which was not the case. He was genuinely a unique individual, and like Jane, my life has been much poorer since we lost him. I personally feel that the system failed him. We will never get him back, but apart from the many happy memories we shared, if his legacy can be to ensure that no one else will ever have to experience what his family and friends have had to unfairly endure, then that will be one tiny ray of light from his passing. Excuse me.
Jane, thank you so much for that account on behalf of both your family and Dan's best friend,
Yes.
Richard Relton.
Yes, thank you.
Amanda, please can we have the photograph on the screen for a few moments?
Oh, yeah. I was a bit skinnier in those days.
Thank you, Amanda. Please take down the photograph.
Thank you.
Can I thank you very much for those very moving accounts?
Thank you.
And also for your evidence, which we very much appreciate.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Jane, thank you. That concludes your evidence.
Mm-hmm.
Chair, we will have a pause for a few moments while the next witness takes to the witness box.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hello. I, Emma Cratnell, do solemnly, sincerely and truly declare and affirm that the evidence I shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth.
Thank you.
Thank you. First, could you give your name for the record, please?
Yes, it's Emma Cratnell.
Thank you. Emma, you are the daughter of Susan Spring, who died on the 1st of February 2012 when she was 54 years old, yes?
That's correct.
You've provided to us a witness statement. You should have a copy of that in front of you.
Yes.
That witness statement is 15 pages long. And if you look, please, at page 15, the final page, there you gave a statement of truth and signed your witness statement, and it's dated the 11th of June of this year.
Yes, that's correct.
Are you happy that your witness statement is accurate?
Yes, I am.
That witness statement, as you know, will stand as your evidence, and I won't take you through it line by line in your evidence now. You also, I want to note, provided a commemorative account about your mother and about the impact of her death on your family in our hearing in November of last year, and we thank you for that evidence and for your evidence today. The first, you were aware that there were serious problems with your mother's mental health was when you received a call on the 11th of January 2012, is that right?
That's correct, yes.
That call, as I understand it, was from your mother's partner
Yes, it was.
to say that she was in hospital and that she had taken an overdose.
Yes, that's all he told me at the time, yeah.
Now, your mother had a history of chronic pain and that had been being managed with painkillers for some time.
Yes, she'd been suffering with lower back pain, so I just presumed that she'd taken some of her painkillers, and it had a bad effect, yeah.
Yes. When you got to hospital, you quickly realised how urgent it was. She had been admitted to A&E at Broomfield. Her wrists, her arms were bandaged, and she was in a coma.
Yes.
Her partner told you that she had cut her wrists in the bath and had taken a large overdose of various medication.
Yes, she was laying in the bath and had cut both of her wrists, and yeah, she was then resuscitated in the ambulance, and yeah, she was still in a coma when we got there, so.
Yes. All of this was completely unexpected to you because before that date you had been unaware of any mental health problems.
No, none whatsoever, nothing.
I'm looking if you want to follow it, but you don't need to, at page 2 of your witness statement and at paragraph 10. You tell us a little there about the state that your mother was in when she came round. You describe her as being a quivery wreck.
Yeah, so when she was in the hospital, me and my partner rushed back to the house to see what medication she was on, because it was then I realised how much medication she had taken, because there was boxes and boxes of tablets that she'd taken. And when we got back to the hospital, she had come round and she was just saying how sorry she was and that she hadn't meant to do that. And you know, she didn't. I had a bit of red on my top, which was a heart, and she thought that was blood. She was just all a bit of a panic. She didn't really understand where she was and what she had done.
Yes.
So.
And she stayed at Broomfield until she was discharged on the 17th of January, so 5 days.
Yes.
What you tell us in your witness statement is that, in fact, during that time, she was on a general ward, not a psychiatric ward.
That's correct.
And that she was awaiting a review by a plastic surgeon for the injuries to her wrists.
Yes, that was the only reason that she had stayed in that long, was because she kept getting pushed back because it was like a waiting list to see the surgeon for her wrists, yeah.
Yes.
So every time I'd go in, it would say on the board, kneel by mouth, because she was having to not have any food.
Yes.
To wait for, just in case a space came available to get her wrists.
Yes.
Both of her wrists sewn back up.
Yes. And as a result, for quite a large part of those 5 days, she wasn't eating.
No.
You also tell us that you consider that that was a very serious suicide attempt by your mother on the 11th of January.
Yes, it was definitely, sadly, it was an attempt to end her life, yes. I'd got no doubt about that. It was a very extreme way of doing things, but as she was, in past, worked in the police for the last 20 years, she sadly knew ways to do things. So it was, sadly, now I think back, it was premeditated. It was all planned, the way to do things, yeah.
One of the other things that leads you to conclude that it was planned and premeditated is that your mother was aware on that day that her partner would be out for many hours.
Yeah, he was going to be at golf.
Yes.
For the majority of the day, and yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
One of the things that you tell us is that a major concern, if not the major concern for you, is the fact that what your mother did on the 11th of January 2012 was noted down in her records as self-harm, and that you feel very strongly that it wasn't taken seriously as a very extreme attempt to bring her life to an end.
No, throughout the whole assessment and the time in hospital and the time after, it was all deemed as self-harm, and it was not a suicide attempt. It was never really spoken about like that, but it was definitely, that she wanted to end her life, yeah. That's very sad by what she had done, what she'd known as in her professional life as well. It was the tablets that she took.
Yes.
She was fully clothed when she got into the bar. It was all very...
Yes.
Not in sound mind at all.
She had been a police officer for more than 20 years.
Yeah, she worked as a police officer, and then she went back and worked in as in the Metropolitan Police after she'd had me, yeah.
One of the things you have discovered is that when your mother arrived at A&E or on that day or the day after, she was asked if she wanted to be sectioned.
Yeah, so one of the things that we had, obviously, just general conversation with Mum afterwards, was that they had said, you know, would you like to be sectioned? And she'd replied, with her partner present, no. But my argument and my strong feeling now is, you know, what do you have to do to be sectioned and that choice be taken away from you, where actually we need to wrap the care around you and say, we know best at the moment, you're not very well, and we can tell that by, you know, what we've just witnessed, and we need to look after you, so we will be sectioning you.
Yes.
And taking care of you for this time. And
Yes.
you know, it shouldn't be deemed as a bad thing. It should be deemed as actually we are, you know, going to take good care of you now, and we're going to look after you in this way, and we feel that this is going to keep you safe for, you know, instead of being, oh, you know, being sectioned such a bad thing, and the
Yes.
delivery of that being an option. It should have been, you know, in this case, the people that do this, you know, this is the outcome of those actions, you know.
Yes.
Some choice needs to be taken away just due to the fact that she was obviously unable to keep her, she was not in sound mind from her actions, and she needed to be looked after. And unless you're going to then do the carers assessment, which wasn't completed, and make sure that care is foolproof at home,
Yes.
you know, and that could be carried out at home, then that needs to be looked into as a serious option to be sectioned. Yeah, I don't think it should be a negative thing.
Yes. One of the things you now know from the records is that during your mother's stay in a general ward at Broomfield, she had no assessment from a psychiatrist at any time.
No.
There was one assessment by a social worker,
Yes.
and we'll come on to this, but at a much later stage, an independent psychiatrist produced a report about your mother's care and treatment during that period.
Yes.
For the purpose of a civil claim, I think, and concluded, amongst other things, which we'll come on to, that the assessment that was carried out by an approved social worker when your mother was at Broomfield was wholly inadequate.
It deemed on me, because of my profession now, I work in domestic abuse, that the carers, the social worker saw my mum with her partner, and I just deem that is like two-pronged really, that, you know, we don't know what goes on behind closed doors in anyone's relationship. I don't doubt that there was anything untoward,
Yes.
but just in case there was, I think that needs to be carried out on their own, and also because you just try to protect the people that, you know, you love. So
Yes.
you don't want to say, actually, I don't want to be here anymore, because how sad and hurtful is that to the person, you know, you who loves you. So I think, you know, it needed to be completed, you know, as it is done in maternity now, which is really good.
Yes.
It needed to be done on our own. So
I understand. So 2 points there. Your first, that at no stage was your mother assessed without being in the presence of her partner. And it's your view that in general terms, there should be at least one assessment or one discussion with a clinician that takes place with the patient alone. Partly because without any knowledge about the person's background, always having the partner present during those discussions or during an assessment could present a risk if there were a background of coercion and control or domestic abuse, but also because, and you do tell us this in other parts of your statement, your mother was very good at minimising how bad she was feeling, and spent, as I understand it, when you did discuss it, quite some time saying, after the 11th of January 2012, that she was all right now, and she didn't know why she did it, and it was just a blackout, and she hadn't intended to end her life.
yeah, and she would have always said that to protect me from, what was really happening. And it was only later when I requested her medical history that I didn't find out that she was actually on antidepressants at the time as well. Before,
Yes.
I think she'd just come off them, but she had to have previous history of being on antidepressants, which I never would know, but a parent doesn't always know those things about, you know, a child doesn't always know those things about a parent, do they? So
No.
shouldn't have really known. But
Well, and as you say elsewhere in your statement, you and your mother had an appropriate mother-daughter relationship,
Yeah.
and there are matters she might not want to have discussed with you.
No, I didn't know those things.
Were you asked at any stage to give any input into what kind of person your mother was, or what her triggers might have been, or how she presented normally when she was not unwell?
No, I wasn't spoken to at all. And actually, we say she was with a partner, but I actually am her legal next of kin, so I was never, ever asked a single thing about. And it was just at the time we were just all so, because now thinking back, I think maybe I should have been a bit more bolshy, and I should have maybe made my presence a bit more clear and sort of said, what's going on. But at the time we were just hoping that somebody was going to take us under their wing.
Yes.
And, tell us all these things that were going to happen, but I never got spoken to.
Yes.
At all.
One of the descriptions you give of that period in your witness statement is that you were all walking around like zombies.
Yeah, we were just on another planet, honestly. I just never thought it would happen to us because we'd never had a previous mental health issues in the past. I've never dealt with anybody with mental health in the past, so
Yes.
it was all very new to me. I just didn't really know what was going on. I just knew that the person in front of me now was not my mum.
Yes. You describe her after the 11th of January as being and presenting to you, who knew her well, as a very unwell person.
Yeah, and that is, I think, I'm so pleased that I had that time at home with her after the first attempt, because I saw how poorly she was, because I saw that she was just a different person.
Yes.
She was really not very well, and she was unable to make the smallest of decisions, where she was obviously in her role at work as a professional, she was making decisions all the time about really important things, whereas, she wouldn't even, if she wanted lunch or not, she wasn't able really to process
Yes.
those sort of decisions. She was really unwell, yeah.
Yes. One of the other things that you tell us is that before your mother was discharged on the 17th of January, there was no communication with you. She had, as I understand it, a very large and loving support network of friends and family who could have been drawn on for support, but were all as in the dark as you were about what to do and what should be done.
Yeah, and sadly people do stay away unless they're being made to be involved. People just think, you're getting on with things, but we really need someone to bring us all together and say that, how can you all help?
Yes.
Because we didn't want her to be left alone for long periods of time. She wasn't very well, so if we'd known, and if everyone come together to make a plan, we could have had a rota system, but
Yes.
we put all of our faith in the crisis team.
Yes.
To be there, to see her, to tell us what was going on, to say if she was getting better or not.
Yes.
We just didn't know. We were just all completely in the dark with everything, really.
Yes.
Just hoping that they were going to kind of fix her.
Yes. So she was discharged to the care of a home treatment team.
Mm-hmm.
You had very few details about that or what that would involve.
Yeah. They were going to see her every day is all I knew.
Yes.
Not for how long, not when, not what time, not what they were going to do while they were there.
Yes.
Nothing. Just I think they would be coming in to see her.
Yes. Whilst your mother was at Broomfield between the 12th of January and the 17th of January, she was not medicated in terms of any psychiatric treatment or care.
No.
But you, in fact, she was prescribed some antidepressants to start after she left hospital.
Yeah.
And you, in fact, went to the pharmacy with her to pick up that prescription.
Yeah.
You tell us that it had been your understanding that many antidepressants take 2 weeks to start to work, and that to you it's very difficult to see why that treatment, if it was deemed necessary, was not started while she was on a general ward in hospital.
I just don't understand. And it was so stressful to be going with her to, stand in line at a pharmacy and paying for this medication.
Yes.
I'm not saying we shouldn't pay, but, but just having that realisation that we needed this medication, and it was just, and what if she didn't want to take it? It was like she needed it. And I just remember thinking, what if I wasn't here to bring her? She couldn't drive. Her wrists were, she just had surgery on both wrists. What if that person wasn't able to drive to the pharmacy to get their medication. It was all like, why wasn't this given to her before? Why wasn't she being put on this and told, take it like this?
Yes.
She was then having to read the instructions, and it was just no care. I just remember thinking, I'm so glad that I'm here with you to be able to support you in taking this medication. So,
were you made aware of who saw her for a psychiatric assessment while she was in Broomfield?
she saw one lady, but it's documented it somewhere, isn't it? That the lady that she saw,
But you didn't have any contact with
no,
them?
No.
And they did not tell you specifically about the assessments that she'd had for her mental health state?
No, it was only my mum said that they was asked if she wanted to be sectioned, and she said no.
That was it?
That was it, yeah, that's all I got told, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. One of the other major concerns that you raise is that it does not appear that any thought was given before your mother was discharged to what her home environment looked like and who would be there to take care of her. You refer to it as a carer's assessment. None was carried out.
No.
And separately from the point you've made about seeing a patient alone so that they can express themselves in full without fear of upsetting their families or their loved ones, I think, is this right? What you feel is that it was entirely inappropriate to discharge someone into the very environment they had just come from, having made a very serious attempt on their life, without looking at what that home environment was.
Yeah, they just did not even know what they were sending her back to.
Yes.
You know, she'd just been found in a coma in a bath, fully clothed.
Yes.
And then they sent her back there 5 days later.
Yes.
To the same situation. It was just with no conversation with any relatives. You know, she's got a sister and daughters. You know, like there's loads of people.
Yes.
You know.
One of the things you tell us is that when you received a call from your mother's partner to say that she was being discharged, your first feeling was one of relief because you assumed that she would have been screened and she was safe to go home.
Yeah. We were obviously excited to have her at home, but we were believing everything that she was saying, and that we were just hoping that the medical people there had made the assessment that she was obviously deemed fit enough to go home, and which is obviously not true. Retrospect.
In terms of the home visits that then took place, we know from the records that during that period your mother received visits from at least 5 different individuals. And the way that you describe those is that they were very ad hoc. You never knew what time someone was going to come.
This was one of the sad things as well, because she was pinning a lot of her hopes on them, and she was wanting to be there when they were going to arrive, but we never knew what time they were going to be there. So I would say, let's go to the garden centre and get a coffee, or let's go for a walk and do things. And she would say, no, because we've got to wait, we don't know when they're going to be here. And so I did end up speaking to them and saying, could you ring us we'll never be more than half an hour away from wherever. Could you ring us half an hour and we'll come back? Because she wants these appointments with you. She's pinning, wants to see you. And that never happened either.
Yes.
So we just didn't, she couldn't have come for us for Sunday roast, for lunch or whatever. And we weren't able to do that because we weren't able to really give her that recovery, to see friends and family, because she was sitting around waiting for these 20-minute, 15-minute sessions with these, like you say, different people that we'd not seen before.
When you called to discuss with them the difficulties it was causing, that you never knew when the visits were going to be, what response did you get? What were you told?
They did say that they would do that. They would ring us half an hour before. They seemed like that was a reasonable request, but they never did.
But it didn't occur?
No.
One of the other things you tell us is that your mother was given a hard copy, a printed handout about anxiety. Tell us about that.
So in one of the first or second sessions, I remember going there later that day, and my mum showing me what she'd received, and it was like the biggest. It was a big about 20 pages of the poorest photocopied handouts that you could ever see about managing anxiety, managing depression, and it was just so big. And if you know anything about depression, your concentration level was very low. She wasn't even able to read the book that she'd got bookmarking by her chair, so she was never going to sit there and read reams and reams. And I just think that should have been done practically with her in like a really trauma-informed way, and they could have maybe worked through it together rather than here, read this. Even if it was a leaflet, but again, one size doesn't fit all with any of these things. So I just think it was like a really, again, it was just like a realisation, this is what I must have then. I must have depression, anxiety and those things. It just wasn't a very nice way of receiving this information, and it was just unusable. And when we had, because we obviously had loads of complaint meetings afterwards, sadly, when we really weren't in the right frame of mind either, we were completely driven with grief, and we were having these meetings. We sat there, and when I showed them what she'd been handed, they said, no one should ever be handed that. It was,
because of the size and the quality of it.
Yeah, both of those. They took it from me. They just said, can we please have this to show and to say this should never be handed out to anybody else. So
yes, I understand. I think either on discharge or on one of the home visits, your mother was also given a CD, maybe a meditation or something to play, and she accepted that.
Mm-hmm. But
she didn't have anything
to play on it.
No, she didn't have anything to listen to that on.
No, but I think that again, just if you're in that profession and you're doing those assessments, she was just a people pleasing at that point. She was just taking, give me a book, I can't read it. Thank you, give me a CD, I can't play it. But that's how unwell she was. She was just masking everything, minimalising everything. Yes, of course I'm well enough to listen to this. On we don't have a sound system. It's quite an old thing to give someone really now.
Yes. One of the things you tell us, I think you said a few moments ago, is that as far as you were aware, when there were home visits, those lasted for no more than 15 or 20 minutes.
Yeah. No.
Those didn't seem to you to be assessments or sessions of any kind. They were almost like a check-in. Is that a fair way to describe it?
Yeah, I would definitely. Well, one of the sessions, she didn't even take her coat off. That was part of my complaint as well, because she just came in. She made a very rude remark about saw my mum's tablets, shook them at her and said, "Oh, you'll be rattling on these." And she didn't even take her coat off. And after that, she stopped taking the tablets as well. Because it was, it's a very derogatory thing to say, because we wanted her on those tablets.
Yes.
We should be anything promoting those tablets after what we'd all been through. And to say that she'll be rattling, I think it obviously is a term, I've heard it before, a phrase that you do say when people are on medication, but it's not a professional thing to say.
Yes. And do you think, in your view, was it as a direct result of that, possibly intended to be a flippant remark, that your mother did stop taking some of the medication she'd been prescribed?
Yeah.
I think you say that one of those was diazepam, and then when she stopped taking it, she had even more problems sleeping.
She wasn't sleeping,
Yes.
Yeah, and just not taking the coat just means you're not, not going to be around for long. Not taking your coat off just means you're not settling in. It wasn't going to be a cold house. It was a lovely home. So it just meant that he wasn't really going to be there for very long.
Yes. One of the other things you tell us about in your witness statement, but didn't know about at the time, is that there were a series of sort of, I think they were called SMART targets that were set for those who were coming to see your mother on home visits. And having seen them now, you consider that they were incredibly inappropriate. One of those, I think, was a sort of goal to encourage your mother not to fear change and to see it as something positive and to try and manage her anxiety in that way. And there were others that were very general and around determining if her mood was impacting her ability to function. Now, to you, I think, and you must tell me if I am wrong, it was very clear that your mother's mood was impacting her ability to function.
Yeah.
What is it about these targets and this sort of let's encourage her to understand that change is not necessarily negative. What is it about those that you consider to have been inappropriate?
It was just the reason that change needed to occur. So I think the reason that they put that in as part of the target was because she was worried about going back to work.
Yes.
And then though she was then worried about like the financial burden that would then put on the family. So they were saying, but change is a good thing because you can get a new job and you could do new courses and things. But she needed like it was like they missed a stage. They'd gone from 1 minute she's sadly dying in a bath to next minute she needs to appreciate that change could be a good thing. Well, she's a very professional person. She didn't really need someone to tell her. Obviously, change can be a good thing, can also be a very worrying thing.
Yes.
But they kind of missed a care bit in her plan of getting her back to just of a sound mind. She wasn't able to really she wasn't able to make any decisions. She just wasn't in the normal frame of mind to be able to go, oh yeah, you are right, change is a good thing. She wasn't.
Yes.
It didn't. Yeah, it was just it was an odd thing to put as a target, really.
An odd thing. Is this fair? I think that to you it seemed particularly odd, and plays into what you've been telling us about what appears to have been to you a failure to recognise how serious your mother's attempt on her life was on the 11th of January.
Yeah, I mean, they're all in our complaint. All they ever kept referring to us was self-harm, and we just had to keep bringing them back and saying, how bad did it? What? I don't know what attempt you would see as a suicide attempt if that wasn't one. I wanted some clarification. Well, what is a suicide attempt then?
Yes.
Because that definitely was a suicide attempt, not a self-harm. And that's how it was treated. It was being treated more like a panic attack. Like that she'd just, she'd had a few moments, but it was very serious what and premeditated as well. I do believe it was premeditated, that she'd got the tablets, she'd stored the tablets up to do it.
Yes. I understand that there came a day when you were at home with your mother when one of the staff who was visiting was having a short discussion with you in the kitchen and said, I think this was on the 30th or the 31st of January, this is our last visit, we're done now, we're discharging her from the service.
Yeah, and I just said, you can't. And the kitchen is like here, and then there was a corridor, and then there's the living room, and I just looked towards my mum and I was like, she's not well, that person. And I think that just goes back to the fact there were so many people going into that home. No one could ever saw the real person.
Yes.
I'd only ever seen her poorly, and then 5 people just assessing a poorly person. And again, she was masking it and minimising it all the time, taking the hand out, taking the CD when she had no way of using things, and she was just minimising. But I was like, that's not my normal mum. My normal mum is like, right, come on, we're doing this now, right, this is it, she's in charge.
Yes.
And she was not in charge of anything. She was...
Did you say that to staff at the time?
Yeah.
This is not my mum?
That's not my mum.
Yes.
No.
And then as I understand it, the next day you were going out and you received a call from your mother and her partner, and both of them were in, I think, what you describe as a mess or a complete state.
My mum just rang me, and they were just in... She was just going over and over the same concerns, and I just kept saying all the time, it's not for us to worry about now. She was so worried about returning to work.
Yes.
And that she wasn't able to do that well, and she wasn't. She could not have gone back to work. That would not have been very safe for anybody.
No.
So yeah, she wasn't able to return to work. And again, her colleagues at work hadn't come and done an assessment yet. So I was just saying, just wait for all these things to happen. You're thinking too far ahead. You don't need to worry about these things at the moment. And then sadly, her partner was also kind of feeding into that concern. Whereas, I was trying to say, don't worry about that yet.
Yes.
He was also feeling a bit, I think they just got themselves into a bit of a place where they were unsure about the future.
Yes.
And and I put some things in place. So I then rang the crisis team and told them the situation, and I also spoke to my mum's sister, who's was head of the HR department. So I thought she could give some reassurance that the situation, would be ironed out and it would all be okay.
Yes.
But sadly, both of those things didn't happen. And
So when you spoke to the crisis team, you explained that your mother was in a state and needed to be seen. And what were you told? Were you told that someone would visit?
Yeah,
That then didn't take place?
that didn't take place, no. Well, it might have been too late if it was going to take place.
Yes.
I don't know.
You learnt, I think, about your mother's death from a phone call from her partner.
Well, he was. They rang me and said, "You need to come home," and the police and my mum's partner were at home and told my partner, and then I got home and he told me that she'd died. Yeah.
As far as you can remember, is this right? In the aftermath of your mother's death, no one from any organisation contacted you?
No.
And the crisis team had said they would come.
Yes, they did. Yeah, they were going to come. Yeah.
You, along with family members, began to make complaints to various authorities from about mid-April of 2012, so only 2 weeks after your mother had died.
Yeah, it was she died the 1st of February.
Yes.
So it was, a month after.
A little more than 2 weeks, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, no, that's okay.
You did, as I understand it, have one meeting with the trust about your complaints.
We wrote loads of letters and then we finally got to have a meeting with them. Yeah, 2 ladies had a meeting with us.
Tell us about that meeting. What can you remember about it?
I think they were just, they were obviously very sorry, and they were apologetic, and they were embarrassed about the handout when I gave it back to them. They were cross about that, and
Yes.
Said obviously things would change, and they took some of our recommendations on board. And there was a bit of argumentation about some of the things that I was obviously quite cross about some of the things, and they did say some of the things that they're put in place are the way it normally happens, the practice that normally goes on. That is it. They do see you ad hoc, come over to the house ad hoc like that, and that was the way they were saying that the excuse was that they have lots of people to cover, they have a big area to cover, so they can't give you a time, and
Because they've got a big geographical area for staff to cover home visits over.
Yeah, so they were saying things like that, really, that they can always say a time, and they didn't know how many people they were going to have on the caseload, and they were obviously short-staffed.
Yes.
So one person was covering a big area.
Yes.
So things like that, but...
If we look, you don't need to look at it, but so that you know where I am, I'm looking now at page 11 of your witness statement, and that's paragraph 91. There you have listed a number of the recommendations that came out of the Trust's report, all of which I think you agree with but would add to.
Mm-hmm.
The first is that a risk management plan should be in place if a person following an assessment remains on a medical ward in hospital.
Mm-hmm. I just think she should have been seen that last day to just make sure, because she obviously saw the social worker, I think day 2 or day 3.
Yes.
But I think the last meeting should be, making sure she had the right medication and making sure she was obviously then fit enough to come home. That wasn't done by a psychiatrist. That was just done, by the medical ward staff. That she'd obviously her scars, her arms, wrists had healed up enough for her to go home. Nothing about her mental health.
Yeah, so she met, in terms of her physical health, she met the criteria for discharge.
Yeah.
But your point is, and I think this is one of the recommendations with which you agree, is that there ought also have been an assessment of whether or not she met the criteria to be discharged safely in terms of her mental health.
Mm-hmm.
And that simply did not take place.
No.
Looking at C on page 11, the Trust's report also recommended that any risk assessment and management plan should follow a face-to-face meeting.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand is this right, that you agree with that and think that it's probably obvious that that should be done face to face?
Yeah, and those targets, I think they should be done maybe jointly as well. I think that was what they thought that she needed to work on, those 3 SMART targets, but actually was that done with my mum? Is
Yes.
that what my mum wanted to work on?
Yes.
Was it just one of those exercises that needs to be completed? We need some targets to work towards. Is it something that she also wanted to? I don't know. I wasn't in every session, so I don't know if that's something they came up with together or.
Yes. Then at D, and this is about the ad hoc home visits that we've been discussing, the report recommended that the way in which staff were allocated for those home visits should be reviewed.
Yes, not such a large caseload and not such a large area, yeah.
Because what that resulted in for your mother, as far as you saw it, was not only sporadic care and possibly inconsistent care, but also it affected your ability as a family to do things with her that were ordinary, have her in your home, take her out, that would, in your view, have assisted her recovery.
Yeah, and she would have been having to repeat herself as well, because if she's meeting 5 different care assistants, she would have been having to retell what had happened, or perhaps, reintroduce herself and re-say all these things again. So the support session would kind of always be starting from the beginning rather than building up on what you'd already, that relationship you'd already got together.
Yes, rather than starting from 0 each time.
Every time, yeah.
Yes. The next recommendation that you've set out is to do with this booklet that we've talked about, and the recommendation was that kind of information, if it's provided to a patient, should be concise and easy to use.
Yes.
And I think it's your view, really, that, and you must tell me if this is wrong, it needs to be more individualised, and that perhaps for someone who was as seriously unwell as your mother was, there might be merit in reading that kind of information, but that perhaps that should be worked through with a member of staff or talked through with her. Is that right?
Yeah, just thought it would be nice if to done in a session,
Yes.
rather than can we look at this together?
Yes.
Rather than just be handed. It would have been nice, do you know what anxiety is? Can we look at, does any of this fit your description? Can we put any of these practical, things in grounding techniques, I don't know, things in place together? Would any of these work for you, rather than, here?
Yes. And then this is your last point at paragraph 91. The Trust's report did recommend that patients, it describes those as service users, being home treated should be seen alone at least once during an episode of care, which I understand that you agree with.
Yes, yeah. For the points that I said before, but you just don't want. So when she went to the doctors, I said, "Would you like me to go in with you?" And she said no. And I think that's, you just don't want to tell everybody in front of people, do you, how you really feel? And I think you just need to be. And I think that even if that person really insists, that person, I think you need to say, actually, we just do this on our own. We just need to, even if they come in at the end or something.
Yes. So rather than saying every time, for example, to a woman, would you like your partner to come in with you? I think what you're talking about is having at least a stage of assessment or treatment where that option is not given.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah, and that's what happens in maternity now, and I think that should be the same, really, because you just don't know, and you don't want to. What happened already? She'd already hurt us a lot, and she knew she hurt us a lot. So I think making us disconnect from the next part of, the care, I think she would have felt, that was going to hurt us as well. So she wanted to kind of include us. So I was there for the support sessions as well. In hindsight, that should have probably not been.
Yes.
It should have been done just private.
Yes. Thank you. You return then to the lack of any kind of investigation into your mother's home environment, or any a failure to carry out a carer assessment. And one of the points you make is that really someone ought to have been looking at whether her partner and or you were in a frame of mind to be able to give her the care that she required so soon after the events of the 11th of January.
I was so upset to see when I was looking on their website that actually one of the things they say is they do a carer's assessment, and we were never asked, anything. We never completed this care assessment that they say, which I think is a really good idea.
Yes.
And they never did that, because people's past, you just don't know what goes on, people's traumas in their past, there might be a history of suicide in people's
Yes.
past, that it might be, or mental health. You just don't know if people are able to cope with
Yes.
those things.
Mentally and physically able to care for someone.
Yeah, and financially, and the home, and just loads of things that need to be taken into consideration before you put a person, a sick person back into people's care.
Yes. Going over the page onto page 12, you were asked in the Rule 9 request from the inquiry about other complaints or investigations by organisations external to the trust, so not the trust. And what you say is that in the cycle of grief, you get so angry and so many people let you down. As I understand it, one of your considerations is that you've told us that you wrote a lot of letters and there were meetings, and I understand that you were very active in trying to find out why things had unfolded in the way that they had done. But I think one of the points you make is that this is an enormous burden to place on a grieving family.
Mm-hmm. It was literally the last thing we wanted to do, but I just knew it wasn't right. I just couldn't let it go, because I just kept saying, and me and my dad were writing letter after letter and replying a letter again, and then we finally got that meeting. But I just knew that, and it was the last thing I wanted to do. I was having to do everything, because I was, her only daughter, so I was doing dealing with the solicitors and everything, and lots of other things. I was having to close bank accounts, sell a house, all the other things that I was having to do. But I just knew that we had to put this complaint in, because the service that we received, we'd pinned all our hope on the crisis team.
Yes.
That we just wanted them to take us and say, this, we deal with families in situations like this. This is what we do. We tailor it to you. There's a care. We're going to provide this care. We're going to do these plans, action plans. This is what's going to happen. This is what the care is going to look like. We'll be in every day between these. Even if she said between the afternoon.
Yes,
we
just a
have
window
the morning.
of time.
Yeah, the morning to play with. And, and this is what it's going to look like. It's going to be for 2 weeks, and we're going to reassess it on the 8th week, and we're going to, until the medication. None of that happened. Not one conversation. And I just couldn't believe it, because we pinned this was our last hope.
Yes.
That someone was going to, and I truly believed that she wouldn't do it again. But that was because that's what she was telling me. I was her daughter, but they're professionals. They needed to look deeper. Like the first incident, what she had done, they really needed to take so seriously and say, well, how did that occur? Because now she's telling us she's okay.
Yes.
But how did it get to this point that she wasn't okay?
Yes.
And yes, she's saying that to me, but I was just, grateful that she was still alive.
Yes.
So I was only thinking about that, like selfish point of view. She's still here, but I was never thinking about digging any deeper.
Yes.
But then obviously 2 weeks later, she dies. So obviously she wasn't okay, but they needed to have supported us and helped us within that time.
And gone further.
Popped in for 15 minutes every day.
Yes. I understand that at some stage, your mother had been offered CBT, or cognitive behavioural therapy.
Yes.
But for reasons you're unaware of, that just never came about. It was never followed up.
No,
never
she was
offered.
looking forward to that. She did say that she would be open to do that. So we were kind of saying, I looked into it myself and said, oh, no, that looks good. Maybe you should do that. And she was booked to have it on the Thursday. It just never happened.
Yes.
No one ever came to do that.
We've touched on this already, but for the purposes of a civil claim, an independent psychiatrist looked at all of the records and reviewed the care and treatment that your mother had received. And I understand from your witness statement that you agree with his conclusions.
Mm-hmm.
I'm summarising very generally, but he concluded essentially that her care and treatment was wholly deficient. Is that right?
Yes, he did, yes.
He tells us that whilst your mother was in Broomfield Hospital, despite regular requests from the medical team who were treating her on the general ward for her physical injuries, she was not assessed at any time by a psychiatrist. We know that. We also know from the records that after your mother's discharge, when she was at home, I think the day after her discharge on the 18th of January, she was seen by a doctor at home, but the independent psychiatrist again finds that that assessment was inadequate in terms of taking a full or comprehensive psychiatric history from her. And then linked to two of the points that you've been making, it appears to this psychiatrist from the records that no proper consideration appears to have been given during your mother's stay at Broomfield as to whether or not she might have benefited from psychiatric inpatient treatment. Her actions on the 11th of January are described by that psychiatrist as extreme, and I think in a point that resonates with all that you have been saying, the conclusion is that the extremity of those actions or the severity of that attempt was not really recognised at any stage.
No, they kept calling it self-harm. It was not taken seriously. No. I agree with that.
And then one of that psychiatrist's other conclusions is around a lack of consistency in her care, which we've already touched on. In terms of the events, unless there's anything else that you think I've missed or that you would like to highlight, I want to take you please to the recommendations you've made, and those are at page 13, so the last 2 or 3 pages of your witness statement. And these matters that you've listed, I think, Emma, are a mixture of the matters that you consider to have been the most serious failings in your mother's care, alongside recommendations of what you think should be happening. Many of these we'll already have covered, but I want to give you the opportunity to make further comment or tell us anything that you think I might have missed. The first at paragraph 104A is around the decision to simply say to your mother, would you like to be sectioned, and to take her no at face value and discharge her.
Yeah, and again, that was done in front of her partner as well, so I think they probably just wanted to get home.
Yes.
To try and salvage or make sense of what had happened, rather than actually thinking about what she needed at that time. And like I said at the start, it's just deemed as quite a negative thing, rather than actually it's quite a positive thing to take you in and be looked after for a long period again, however long she needed.
Yes. Your second point at B is about a care assessment for the whole family, to look at what the worries were, what the home environment was, and who was there and able to support her.
Yeah.
Your third point is about the fact that the antidepressant medication she was prescribed wasn't prescribed until discharge.
Yeah.
So the 5 days during which she was on a general ward were sort of empty days in terms of psychiatric treatment or care.
Yeah, she didn't have any medication during that time.
Your fourth is about a support plan or a package, just to give families and those supporting patients who are discharged home an idea of what the framework is and what it can look like and what help and support is available.
Yeah, just outline what the care usually will entail, and then, and tailor it to our family, what our family looks like and how that would fit in with us as well as fitting in with them.
Yes. I think if I were to summarise it, a great deal of the points you make are around not being provided with generic one-size-fits-all care, but actually taking account of the individual and their individual circumstances and their individual family circumstances.
Yeah.
The next point you make at E is about the CBT that was offered but never happened, and we don't know why. And the point you make here is that families pin hope on that kind of offer.
Yeah.
Your mother would have accepted that help. She wanted the help, and it just
wasn't provided. Yeah. But is that something that should also be part of something we talk about at the beginning? You know, this is going to happen on day 6. This is, you know, part of that assessment should be, you know, we're going to see how you are at home, but on day 6 you'll be getting a proper counselling service, or you'll be getting CBT, or you'll be getting other therapies that are more tailored.
Yes.
That's what happens, you know, that's not just something out of the blue. Oh, we could offer you this, and would you accept it? Oh yeah, we'd be having it on that, and it didn't.
Yes.
It's like an afterthought, you know, rather than part of the process.
Yes. And then at the bottom of page 13, you refer back to this conversation you had that day with a member of staff at your mother's home in the kitchen, where it was, you know, suddenly sprung upon you that she was going to be discharged from that home treatment service. And I think, is this right? It's your feeling that when a decision like that is taken, that should be something that involves the whole of the support network.
Yeah. And is it, do you then get seen by a psychiatrist to say, do they make that decision? Who is making that decision?
Yes.
At the end, and what is the guidance, the barometer sort of thing of,
yes,
you know, she got to like number 10 now on
yes,
wellness. What is the...
What progress has been made?
Yeah.
I think if we go over the page, one of the matters you mention again here, which is important to you, is that the fact that your mother minimised her symptoms or minimised how bad she was feeling and masked that to an extent. I'm looking at paragraph little I on page 14, that she presented to those staff who did come to see her at home, smiling and saying, okay, I'm okay. And I think this goes back, does it, to your point about expecting professionals to be able to look deeper.
Yeah, and asking the family what normal is to my mum,
Yes.
because that did present as a normal person, but that not what I would have considered my mum to be normal. But they didn't know that. They were seeing a stranger, and they needed some background, you know, what's she normally like?
Yes.
And because she hadn't got back to that person yet.
Yes. You make the point at paragraph J on the same page that whilst you recognise that there's a problem with resourcing or funding, a crisis team is an emergency service and it needs to be good.
Like you just said, we're just pinning all our hopes on them, and
Yes.
we just couldn't believe what the service was like, that it was so ad hoc, and there just was no, like I say, like a framework would be really helpful, a plan, something to expect. You know,
Yes.
this is what we do in this situation. This is
Yes.
none of that.
You refer back to what you saw of a home visit by a member of staff who didn't even take their coat off, and what that indicated to you about the level of care that was being offered.
Yeah, just it would, and like the times, how long the sessions are going to be, and what they're going to be completing in that. So I mean, if it was just going to be a chat, then that's obviously fine. But how long is that going to be for? It was, and then you know, to look like you're staying for a little while, then rather
Yes.
than just nipping in your coat and going again. So
Yes. You go on at paragraph M to say that in terms of what we've talked about your mother masking and wanting to protect you and others and saying that she was okay, what professionals should have had, in your view, uppermost in their minds were the very serious injuries she had caused herself only 5 days previously.
yes,
And I think, is this fair? It seems to you as though that had almost sort of disappeared from everyone's minds in terms of the home treatment that she received.
Yeah, it just seemed to be forgotten, and it was just, they was obviously taking my mum's word for it, but if they'd kept remembering what she'd just done,
Yes.
then and acted on that rather than, actions speak louder than words kind of
Yes.
phrase, that keeping that at your foremind, that she'd just not wanted to be here 5 days ago.
Yes.
So why? She's saying she's okay now, but why didn't she feel like that 5 days ago?
Yes. Emma, I think, unless there are any other particular matters that you would like to raise, I think that will conclude your evidence. In a moment before you leave the witness box, I'm going to ask that the photograph of your mother that you have provided be put up. Is there anything else that you'd like to say?
I just wanted to say thank you so much for going through this with us, because we really felt like we were on our own, and we were on a bit of a rampage, after she died, and we felt like we were writing letters after letters, and we were getting nowhere, and I just knew that there was something wrong. It just wasn't, I just didn't feel like it was right. You really do pin. I never thought I'd be in this situation. Like I say, my mum never suffered with mental health. It did just come out of the blue. We had such a lovely family set up, and so it just honestly can happen to anybody. And you never know when you need these services, and when you come into these services and it was like that, I was honestly so shocked, and that's why we did write loads of letters. I just wanted it to be better. I know it can be better.
Yes.
And I know the small things, but they mean so much to families. When you come into them, you want someone to wrap you up and just take control and look after you all and steer the way. You don't want, it's nice to have choices and things to be asked of you, but there also needs to be some leadership and someone to take control, because you're not thinking straight.
No.
You're all like zombies. And actually someone coming in and taking you by your hand and saying, this is what we normally do, is really helpful. So I just think for the future, it really needs people to take, that know, the situations that families are in, and take some charge, and, to be asked, do you want to be sectioned? It's a good thing to be going out and have that care for a longer period, the way you sell it, to a family.
Yes.
It could save lives. And I don't know, and I will never know if any of these things would have changed the outcome. But the saddest thing is I will never know. And if all of those things had been done, and I could walk away now and say everything was done, it was perfect, the care she received was amazing, and this still happened, I would be able to be fine. But because I'm left sitting here going, well, what if she had the CBT? What if she had more support? What if she had been sectioned? What if she'd started a medication in hospital? What if she'd been seen by a psychiatrist? I'm left with so many unanswered questions that that's where the frustration and the sadness, of the service came from. And we just wanted it to be answers, to have some answers why this was like this, and can it be different? That's what we're hoping for.
Thank you.
So thank you.
Thank you very much indeed
Thank
for
you.
your evidence. Please be assured that we will take on board what you have had to tell us.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for your time.
Could we have the photo, please?
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Chair, I understand I'm being advised, as long as you're content, that if we can break now for lunch and come back at 2, so slightly longer lunch.
Perfect. 2 o'clock.
Thank you.